Have you ever heard the argument from someone that is a real estate investor, for example, that will tell you that I'm investing in real estate because it's real, because it's physical, because I can touch it, because I can feel it. Houses are never going to disappear, etc., etc., etc. Well, today I want to talk about a little bit about in this series that I'm going to do, basically dismantling the idea of investing in real estate against Bitcoin, right? Because they always say Bitcoin's not physical. What is it? Where is it going to go? Et cetera, et cetera. And I want to argue that in the next, I would say, 20 years, you're going to see more capital come out of real estate, or capital that was meant for real estate go into Bitcoin, than any other asset class that we've seen. And one of these arguments is that real estate is physical. And this is why I want you to subscribe, because I'm going to go through this series over the next few days, just going through each and every single point as to why I invested in real estate, why I was a real estate person when I first started, why I saw clients invest in real estate back in the day, why people invest in real estate now, why my own parents invested in real estate as the one thing that they relied on to build their legacy for their two sons, only to come to find out 35 years later that after all that sacrifice, the property portfolio had to be worth 50 to 80% more than it was in order to keep up with the amount of pounds that have been printed. Not the inflation, but the amount of pounds that have been printed, right? Real, true debasement. So one of the main points that I always hear is the idea that it's physical. It's actually a real asset that I can touch, etc., etc. And I want to argue that's not why you are investing in real estate. Because when I got into real estate, the first thing I noticed, I guess I was lucky, because I got in right in that 2005 period, just to run up to 2007. And I actually understood very quickly what real estate was and why people were investing in it. It wasn't for the house. It wasn't for the fact that it was real. It wasn't for the fact that it was flexible. It was physical. People justified it like that, and they certainly thought that that's why they were getting into real estate, but that wasn't the real reason why they were getting into real estate. The real reason is that they were incentivized by the financial markets to get into real estate, because it's the easiest asset to actually do lending on, right? Real estate is an easy asset to do lending on, because you know it's not going to go anywhere. You know that most likely it's going to be pretty stable. You know that the person who's responsible for it has an emotional attachment to it. So therefore, you should incentivize real estate to be the asset that the financial market can grow because of. At the end of the day, follow the incentives, right? One of the incentives is we want to borrow more money, we want to lend out more money, etc., etc. When you print more money, borrow more money, lend out more money. Well, if that's the case, then real estate is the perfect asset, because people are emotionally attached to it. They believe it's an asset because it's someone's house. Whereas who remembers back in the 60s and 70s when houses used to cost a much smaller percentage of, if not 1-to-1 on your annual salary, whereas now someone who's in their 20s can't even dream about buying a house in a normal area unless they sacrifice everything, right? So houses were once an asset. They weren't even an asset. It's a utility to live in. People were buying houses to live in. Then the financial markets got the grip of it and realized that we can turn this into a securitized asset. Basically, when you buy a house with a mortgage, you are buying a security, right? Because the mortgage is securitizing the house. At the end of the day, it's all these people, all these doom and gloom boomers worry about rehypothecation. When you buy a house and put a mortgage on it, you are rehypothecating that house. And if you do not pay your mortgage, that house will be taken from you. That is the same as a fund rehypothecating an asset like gold and then losing it, right? It's the same thing. The underlying the main process is the same thing. So everyone is actually comfortable with rehypothecation. They just don't understand the emotions around it, which is why they get angry with it when it's about gold or any other asset, but not angry about it when it's about real estate and their own portfolio. They just borrow against it. Real estate is also the best perfect financial asset, because you can basically hold it for 30 years. Typically it's not going to go anywhere. More people are being born, so they're going to need to use the houses, etc., etc. So real estate turns into this perfect financial asset that the financial industry can take a hold of and go, let's lend against it. We can also do long-term rentals against this thing. We can do long-term financing against this thing, because we know it's typically not going to go anywhere, right? Now, if you've been involved in real estate in modern times, you know the quality of the build is going down, because we just got to get more houses out there to fulfill the demand that's happening. But real estate, when people say it's a physical thing, and they're investing in it because it's a physical thing, that's really a lie. That's a justification for why they're doing it. The reason why they're doing it is because the financial markets have incentivized them to buy real estate. Because when you buy real estate, you can borrow money. Typically, borrowing money for real estate is the cheapest cost of borrowing that you have on any type of credit that you're going to borrow. Typically, it's also the longest term borrowing that you can do. Also, if you want to refinance it, it's extremely easy to do so. Just value the house. Okay, I can lend against it, and I know that, as a lender, I know that my money is secure, because somebody can't just pick it up and move it, right? And so all of these reasons tells you why real estate has become a financial asset. So in fact, people are buying it. The real reason why you are buying property, if you are buying property, is not for the physical nature of it. You are literally buying property for the lack of physical nature of the financialization around it. Because if you couldn't get credit to buy that house, you would not buy it. And I'm not talking about prime real estate. I'm not talking about the type of real estate that is beachfront real estate, the one building, number one Hyde Park in London, or Central Park in the USA. I'm not talking about prime real estate. I'm talking about the majority of the average people that have been told that they should buy property in order to do this. So they are literally buying it because it is a financial asset. Otherwise, there's no incentive to buy property. The only incentive to buy a house, if there's no financial incentive around it, the intangible financial incentive, is for the reason of living in it. That's it, right? And what's happened is, since the 70s, since the 60s, these financial markets, the securitization of property has taken over, and now real estate is a securitized asset. If I build a portfolio, I can lend against that portfolio, and it's now basically a security. So the purpose of real estate, when people tell you they're buying it because it's physical and that they can do something with it and they can touch it, etc., this is not the real reason. Because guess what? You can also touch steel, right? You can also touch gold. Why isn't gold 10 times higher as an asset class? Because it's nothing to do with the physicality of it, right? You can also touch iron. You can also feel iron. So why don't people, I would argue that a block of iron is much more physical than a house, but yet people do not invest in iron. The only sole reason that you are investing in real estate is because it is an intangible financial asset that you can manipulate on your balance sheet to generate you revenue and liquidity when you need it. That's the whole point of it. And this has unfortunately happened to the point now where the average person can't even buy a house. If you've got children, if I was working a normal job and I didn't have the good fortune that I had in my early years, I couldn't even dream of buying a house in London. The same places where my parents bought it, I couldn't dream of it, because I would not have the cash liquidity, or the excess income in order to pay for that house. So the argument that I'm buying property because it is physical, etc., is a lie. It is a justification for the fact that it is a financial asset that you want to manipulate. Now, this brings us on to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a much better financial asset than real estate. So therefore, Bitcoin will start extracting capital. Unfortunately, for normal people, the institutions are not emotionally attached to a particular asset, unlike you and I. What they want to do is find out what's the best way that I can borrow and lend against this and grow my ownership stake in this particular asset while growing the amount of borrowing that I'm taking, because they know that's the winning strategy. You're borrowing money almost free, generating a return on it through the cash flow when it comes to real estate, etc. Whereas with Bitcoin, because of the true scarcity of it, cash flow is irrelevant. I'm going to talk about cash flow when it comes to real estate in the next video, so make sure you subscribe to the channel for that. But with Bitcoin, the Bitcoin is the best financial asset because it actually lives up to what real estate was trying to be. It is actually scarce. Real estate is scarce because of regulatory demands that are put onto real estate. It's not scarce because if you had unlimited building permits, all you controlled for was the quality of the house that was built, you would have many more houses than we have right now, and the price of housing would go down. But they actually control how many houses can be built for a particular reason, because it is a collateralized financial asset. It is not a utility, right? I would say something like 50 to 60% of the properties, the main, properties in London, are sitting empty. Why would they just be sitting empty with foreign owners? They're sitting empty with foreign owners because it is a financial asset. That's what it is. It is in some cases it's an escape hatch. In some cases it's a way to borrow more money to grow your wealth at the cheapest rates possible for the longest term possible. So when it comes to Bitcoin, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is if you're a lender and you're looking at it going, I want a securitized asset that I can lend against, but I want to reduce down the number of risks that I have with real estate. There's a bunch of risks with real estate, right? The area that you're buying in could turn into crap. Look at San Francisco, right? And even in San Francisco, property prices are holding up because it's a securitized asset. People have no other options. But now another option is emerging, and that option is Bitcoin. So, for example, if I want a long-term lending proposal on an asset, and I look at real estate versus Bitcoin for the next 20 years, once Bitcoin's price stabilizes, and by the way, that's the opportunity between now and then, that right now the price is volatile, it's a young asset. As the asset turns into more of an adult asset, the price is going to be less volatile, as human beings are. And therefore, I can now lend against that Bitcoin for a longer term period at a lower interest rate because it is possible for me to hold that loan and depend on the Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin has no cost of carry. You don't need to change the roof. You don't need to paint the walls. You don't need to do anything when it comes to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin becomes a better securitized asset. And in fact, the financial markets want assets that have the least amount of physical maintenance that's needed, because that causes risk on their portfolio. Because if the person does not maintain it, then the value of the underlying asset could go down. So Bitcoin has that. You don't have that cost of carry that you're talking about, right? And also when it comes to the incentives around owning Bitcoin, it's much higher. People say, people will always need houses and therefore they're physical and I can own them because people will always need them. Well, with Bitcoin, look at what's coming when it comes to the utility of Bitcoin. You can right now do transactions around the world on the second layer network called Lightning. That is coming. More of that is coming. And as that happens, the utility of Bitcoin goes up. But even when you look at the utility of houses, when I tell you that 50 to 60% of the houses of the flats, of the apartments, or the houses in London are sitting empty because their foreign owners don't want to take the risk or the hassle of actually lending them out, which is the renting part, because the risk is higher of doing that rather than just sitting empty and catching the capital appreciation. That's what's going to happen with Bitcoin. You don't need to generate the cash flow in order for the value of the asset to go up. And the difference with Bitcoin is it's actually the prime real estate, right? Bitcoin is actually the prime land opportunity. It is the prime real estate opportunity. Because there's only so much of it. The reason why number one Hyde Park and I guess, whatever in Central Park is worth what it is because of the scarcity of it. And Bitcoin has the highest amount of scarcity compared to any real estate that you could find. I'm pretty sure there's 21 million houses if you aggregated all oceanfront property. I'm pretty sure there is. There is not more than 21 million Bitcoin in the entire world. Whether you're talking about single family homes, whether you're talking about prime real estate, Bitcoin is everything. And so Bitcoin becomes much more of a desirable asset. And on top of that, you add to the fact that you can actually securitize it, especially with the ETF, right? Because the ETF is already a securitized asset. The one risk with Bitcoin, if you want to borrow against it or you want to lend against it, is what happens if the person loses their keys, what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens. That's a real risk from a lender's perspective. However, once an ETF comes out and you know that BlackRock, Coinbase, or whoever else, Fidelity, is managing that Bitcoin, I can now lend against it and turn Bitcoin into a fully securitized asset, just like real estate. In fact, better than real estate. Why? Because I know it's not going anywhere. I know who the custodian is. I know who's keeping it. And so the incentives will start to shift. So if you're sitting there looking at property going, hey, I've done so well in property, just realize property didn't do well before the 1960s and 1970s. When that financial system changed and they realized we need to figure out a way to pump this money out, now it started to shift. It started to change. And real estate prices started to go up because it became a securitized financial asset. While it was a utility, it had no value, right? It had the value of what type of life experience do you want to have. And therefore it was priced for that. Once it became a securitized asset, the prices went up because the value of the real estate went up. Because of the securitization of it, not because of the property. Does that make sense? I think this is very, very important to understand. Real estate prices did not go up because the real estate was valuable. Real estate prices went up because the real estate in a securitized form was valuable. And that's the one thing that I want you to realize. Anyone who's telling you that they're buying property because it's physical, there might be like 1% of people doing that. Most people are buying real estate because they can borrow against it easily, they can have a long-term borrowing against it easily, and it is a stable asset. What is more stable than 21 million max supply? It can be anywhere and everywhere at the exact same time, and I can securitize and lend against it because I know it's not going anywhere, especially once the ETF comes out. There's no risk of carry on it. There's no risk of a roof leaking. There's no risk of the tenants ruining the place, etc., etc. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to get back to a point where houses are used for what they're used for in the 60s and 70s, which is just living in. And the financial system will adopt Bitcoin as a securitized asset because it just makes the most sense. It has less risks than real estate. It has less overall volatility than real estate once it has a high enough market cap. And there's no geographical risk when it comes to, where is this Bitcoin based. It completely democratizes the financial markets and allows the financial incentives to align behind it. That's why one reason why Bitcoin will beat out real estate, because while people are telling you they're buying real estate because it's physical, they're bullshitting themselves. They're buying real estate because they understand that they can take advantage of the financially incentivized game around real estate. And it was only once real estate became a securitized asset that the prices actually started going up. And that is what is exactly about to happen to Bitcoin right now. And that's why if you've got real estate or you're thinking of allocating into real estate, there has to be a conversation of maybe I should take a small percentage of this and allocate it to Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is the new emerging real estate when it comes to a securitized asset. A lot of people are not going to understand this and they're going to have emotional attachments to real estate, and that I understand, but just admit that you have an emotional attachment to real estate. Not that that Bitcoin is not better than real estate. You have to admit that I have an emotional attachment to real estate and I'm not willing to learn why Bitcoin might be better than real estate and might be the next emerging thing compared to real estate. If you can admit that, then we can move forward. But until you admit that, you're going to be stuck in the doom cycle that real estate is stuck in because the juice has been squeezed out. We are at a point where houses all over the world cost so much money to buy that populations will revolt, will vote out governments if this isn't fixed. So therefore, governments have to step in and use their regulatory powers to control the price of real estate, even though it's a securitized asset. As that happens, the people that are doing the securitizing will realize we need better opportunities than real estate because this ain't working. The profit margins aren't good enough anymore. And they'll look at Bitcoin and say, maybe this can be it. And of course it can be it because it's better than equities, it's better than real estate, it's better than gold. So now Bitcoin starts to become a securitized asset and you remove the securitized value, the price premium value out of real estate. Prime real estate will always have more of a value than anything else. But overall, the idea that Bitcoin is a better securitized asset than real estate makes a bunch of sense. And if you're sitting there telling me, but real estate is physical, that's why I bought it, you're lying to yourself at minimum, and secondly, you're lying to me. So you need to understand the only reason you bought real estate is because of the intangible securitized nature of it after 1970, and before that, people were using housing for what it's meant to be used for, which is living in. So we need to get back to that so people can start having a good quality of life, and Bitcoin is the best asset to do that with. And right now we're going through the securitization of Bitcoin, and it is coming. This is one reason why I do not buy the argument that I bought real estate because it is a physical asset, because you never did. You were trained to. You were trained and incentivized to. So what happens when the world is trained and incentivized to buy Bitcoin because of its securitized nature? What happens in that moment? So if you're sitting there with a real estate portfolio going, hey, I'm kind of happy, I was making 12% a year, now I'm making 8% a year. I'm still kind of happy because at least it's going up. You're lazy. You're not looking at what is happening in the financial markets. Bitcoin is going to be a much better securitized asset than real estate, and therefore it will overall start sucking money away from real estate. Even if it doesn't take a single penny from what's currently in real estate, if it starts taking a few percentage points of the new money that's going into real estate, and you're still sitting there going, yeah, I'm buying real estate because it's physical, understand, no one is ever in this boom cycle of US dollar printing bought real estate because it's a physical asset. They've bought it because it's the easiest securitized asset that they could take part in. And now Bitcoin's taking that. But despite all of this, there's still only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.